Hey Reddit, buckle up for a story that's gonna rip your heart out and stitch it back together in ways you won't see coming. Picture this. A dusty old letter shows up in my mailbox one day, out of nowhere, from the woman I loved more than life itself, the one I thought I'd lost forever. I'm talking about the kind of love that burns so bright it leaves scars, the kind you never really get over. What she wrote in those pages turned my entire world upside down, dragging me back through years of pain, regret, and secrets I'd buried deep. Trust me, you're not gonna believe what this letter revealed, or how it changed everything I thought I knew about my past. Hit play on this video, because you've got to hear the full, gut-wrenching story of how a single piece of paper brought me to my knees, and maybe, just maybe, gave me a shot at redemption. I'm just a regular guy, pushing 40, living in a quiet suburb outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've got a steady job as a mechanic, a small house with a patchy lawn I keep meaning to fix up, and a life that's pretty much on autopilot. But it wasn't always like this. Back in my 20s, I was a different man. Wilder, hungrier, full of dreams and fire, and most of that fire came from her. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I've had my share of relationships over the years, some good, some forgettable, but none of them ever came close to what I felt for her. She was my first real love, the kind that carves itself into your soul, the kind you measure every other connection against, even when you don't mean to. We met when I was 22, fresh out of trade school, working odd jobs at a garage, and trying to figure out who I was. She was a barista at a little coffee shop I'd stop at every morning. And from the first time I saw her smile, bright as a summer day, with a dimple on her left cheek, I was done for. I'd fumble over my words just to make her laugh, and pretty soon, those quick coffee runs turned into late-night drives, stolen kisses in the rain, and promises whispered under the glow of streetlights. Our relationship wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. We were young, broke, and stubborn as hell, both of us carrying baggage from rough childhoods we didn't talk about much. I grew up in a trailer park on the edge of town, with a dad who drank too much and a mom who worked double shifts at a diner just to keep the lights on. I learned early to fend for myself, to build walls around my heart, so I wouldn't get hurt. She had her own demons, stuff she hinted at but never fully shared. Something about a family that fell apart when she was a kid, leaving her to bounce between relatives until she struck out on her own. But when we were together, none of that mattered. We were each other's escape, each other's safe place in a world that felt like it was always out to get us. I'd lie awake at night with her curled up next to me in my tiny apartment, the sound of her breathing steadying my racing thoughts, and I'd think, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for my whole life. We dated for almost 3 years, and those years were a roller coaster of the highest highs and the lowest lows. I remember the good stuff like it was yesterday, road trips to nowhere with the windows down and the radio blaring, her singing off-key to old rock songs while I laughed so hard I could barely drive. I'd save up for weeks just to take her to a nice dinner, watching her eyes light up over a plate of pasta like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. We dreamed together, sprawled out on a blanket in some empty field, talking about a future where I'd own my own garage and she'd go back to school for art, something she loved but never thought she could afford to pursue. I'd hold her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine, and believe with every fiber of my being that we'd make it, that nothing could tear us apart. But the bad times were just as vivid, and they started piling up faster than I could handle. We fought a lot, usually over dumb stuff, money we didn't have, schedules that didn't line up, insecurities that festered under the surface. I'd get jealous when she'd talk about coworkers at the coffee shop, imagining things that weren't there, and she'd snap back, accusing me of not trusting her. I'd storm out sometimes, needing air, needing space, only to come crawling back hours later, hating myself for letting my temper get the better of me. She had her own sharp edges, her own ways of pushing me away when she felt cornered, and we'd go days without speaking, the silence between us heavier than any argument. I'd sit in my truck outside her place, staring at her window, wondering if I should knock, wondering if we were worth fighting for. But I always did. I always went back, because losing her felt like losing a part of myself. Then came the breaking point, the moment that shattered everything we'd built. It wasn't one big fight, not some dramatic blowout you'd see in a movie. It was quieter, more insidious, a slow unraveling that I didn't even notice until it was too late. I'd been working longer hours, trying to save up for a better place for us, and she'd started pulling away, spending more time with friends I didn't know, coming up with excuses when I'd asked to see her. I felt it. This growing distance, like a crack in the foundation of a house you don't see until the walls start crumbling. I'd lie awake at night, alone in my bed, my mind racing with doubts, wondering if she still loved me, if I'd done something wrong, if I wasn't enough. I didn't ask her outright, didn't want to hear the answer, but the fear gnawed at me, eating away at the confidence I'd once had in us. When it finally ended, it was almost anticlimactic. I showed up at her place one evening after a long day at the garage, grease still under my nails, hoping to surprise her with takeout and a cheap bottle of wine. I'd been feeling the strain between us for weeks, and I wanted to fix it, wanted to remind her of what we had. But when I got there, her apartment was half empty, boxes stacked by the door, her face pale and drawn as she looked at me with eyes full of something I couldn't read. I didn't need to ask what was happening. I knew. She was leaving, moving to another city for a job opportunity she hadn't even told me about. I stood there, the bag of food growing cold in my hands, feeling like the ground had dropped out from under me. I didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't do much of anything except nod, my throat too tight to speak. I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me like a gunshot, and that was it. No goodbye, no closure, just the end of everything I'd thought was forever. The months that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I threw myself into work, taking every shift I could, trying to drown the pain in the grind of fixing engines and changing oil. I'd come home to my empty apartment, the silence deafening, and stare at the walls, replaying every moment of our relationship in my head, wondering where I'd gone wrong. I'd see reminders of her everywhere. In the coffee shop I couldn't bring myself to visit anymore. In the songs that came on the radio. In the way the light hit the dashboard of my truck just like it did on those late-night drives. I felt hollow, like she'd taken a piece of me with her when she left, a piece I didn't know how to get back. I'd sit on my couch with a beer in my hand, the TV on but unwatched, feeling this ache in my chest that wouldn't go away, no matter how much time passed. Years went by, and I tried to move on. I dated other women, had a couple of semi-serious relationships, but nothing stuck. I'd compare every smile, every touch, to hers, and they always fell short. I built a life for myself, bought a house, climbed the ranks at the garage until I was running my own crew, but there was always this undercurrent of loneliness, this quiet regret that followed me like a shadow. I'd wonder about her sometimes, late at night when the world was still, if she was happy, if she ever thought about me, if she'd found the life she'd wanted when she walked away. I didn't look her up, didn't try to find her on social media, or ask mutual friends for updates. I told myself it was better that way, that some wounds are best left untouched, even if they never fully heal. Fast forward to now, to a rainy Tuesday afternoon a few weeks ago, when everything I thought I'd buried came rushing back. I was coming home from a long shift, my boots heavy with mud, my back aching from hours bent over a stubborn transmission. I stopped by the mailbox out of habit, expecting the usual mix of bills and junk mail, when I saw it. A plain white envelope, no return address, just my name scrawled across the front in a handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. My heart stopped, my breath catching in my throat as I stood there in the drizzle, the paper trembling in my hands. I knew it was hers before I even opened it, some deep, primal instinct recognizing the loops of her letters, the way she dotted her eyes. I didn't move for a long moment, just stared at it, feeling a storm of emotions I couldn't name. Fear, curiosity, a flicker of hope I didn't want to acknowledge. I took the letter inside, my hands unsteady as I dropped my keys on the counter and sank into a chair at my kitchen table. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft patter of rain against the windows, and I felt like I was on the edge of something I couldn't control. I tore the envelope open, careful not to rip the paper inside, and unfolded a single sheet, her words staring back at me like a ghost from the past. My eyes scanned the first line, and it was like a punch to the gut. She started by saying she'd been thinking about me for years, that she'd written this letter 100 times in her head before finally putting pen to paper. My chest tightened, my pulse racing as I read on, each word pulling me deeper into a past I'd tried so hard to leave behind. She wrote about her life since we'd parted, how she'd moved to Chicago for that job, how it hadn't turned out like she'd hoped. She'd bounced between careers, never quite finding her place, and had gone through her own share of heartbreak, relationships that crumbled, dreams that slipped through her fingers. I felt a pang of sadness reading that, imagining her struggling, wishing I could have been there to help, even as a part of me bristled at the thought after how she'd left me. But then she got to the part that hit me hardest, the part that made my hands shake and my vision blur with unshed tears. She said she'd never stopped loving me, not really, that leaving me was the biggest mistake of her life, a choice made out of fear and uncertainty, not because she didn't care. She wrote about how she'd been too scared to stay, too afraid of how much she needed me, how much it terrified her to think of building a life together when she didn't even know who she was yet. I sat there, the letter crumpled in my grip, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. All the pain I'd carried for years, all the questions I'd never gotten answers to, came flooding back in a tidal wave. I remembered the nights I'd spent wondering why she left, blaming myself, thinking I wasn't enough, and now here she was, saying it wasn't about me at all. It was about her own demons, her own doubts. I felt this raw, jagged anger, mixed with a longing so deep it hurt. I wanted to hate her for what she'd done, for the years of silence, for the way she'd walked out without a word, but I couldn't. Not completely, because underneath the hurt, there was still love, still that stubborn, stupid part of me that had never let her go, even after all this time. I didn't sleep much that night, my mind a mess of memories and what-ifs. I'd get up, pace the dark house, then sit back down with the letter, rereading it until the words were burned into my brain. I thought about the day she left, the way I'd stood there frozen, unable to fight for her, unable to say the things I should have said. I wondered if things would have been different if I'd chased after her, if I'd told her I'd wait, if I'd begged her to stay. I felt this crushing weight of regret, not just for what I'd lost, but for the man I'd become in the aftermath, closed off, guarded, afraid to let anyone in again. I stared out the window at the rain-soaked street, feeling like I was 25 again, heartbroken and lost, but with the added ache of years wasted, years I could have spent trying to find her, to fix what we'd broken. The next few days were a blur. I carried the letter with me, folded in my jacket pocket, like it was a lifeline or a curse. I couldn't decide which. I'd pull it out during breaks at the garage, reading a line or two under the harsh fluorescent lights, feeling my heart twist every time. I didn't tell anyone about it, not my buddies at work, not my sister who'd seen me through the worst of the breakup all those years ago. I needed to process it on my own, needed to figure out what it meant, what I wanted. Because at the end of the letter, she'd left her number, saying she'd understand if I never called, but that she'd be there if I did. That scared me more than anything. The possibility of reaching out, of opening that door again, of risking the kind of pain I'd barely survived the first time. I started noticing how much her words had shifted something inside me. I'd catch myself smiling at old memories I hadn't let myself think about in years, her laugh, the way she'd tease me about my terrible cooking, the quiet moments when we'd just sit together, not needing to say anything at all. But those memories came with a sting, a reminder of how much it hurt when she left, how empty my life had felt without her. I'd drive home after work, the radio off, lost in thought, wondering if I was crazy to even consider calling her. I felt torn between the past and the present, between the man I was and the man I wanted to be. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling this restless energy, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump or turn back. Then came a moment of clarity, or at least something close to it, about a week after I got the letter. I was working on a beat-up old Chevy in the garage, my hands deep in the engine, when a song came on the shop radio, one of those old rock tunes we used to blast on our road trips. I froze, wrench in hand, as the lyrics washed over me, bringing back the image of her singing along, her hair whipping in the wind, her smile brighter than the sun. I felt this ache, not just of loss, but of longing, of unfinished business. I realized I didn't want to keep living with this weight, didn't want to keep wondering what could have been. I needed to know, needed to hear her voice, even if it meant risking everything I'd built to protect myself since she left. I didn't call her right away, though. I waited a few more days, wrestling with my nerves, drafting what I'd say in my head 100 times. I'd sit at my kitchen table, her number scrawled on a scrap of paper next to the letter, my phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over the call button. My heart would pound, my palms sweaty, as I battled the fear of rejection, the fear of hearing that she'd changed her mind, that the letter was just a moment of weakness. But I also felt this pull, this need to close the chapter, one way or another. I'd think about the life I'd lived without her, the loneliness I'd accepted as normal, and wonder if there was a chance for something more, something better, even if it wasn't with her. When I finally made the decision, it was late one night, the house dark except for the glow of a single lamp. I'd had a couple of beers, not enough to cloud my judgment, just enough to dull the edges of my anxiety. I sat on my couch, the letter on the coffee table in front of me, and dialed her number with shaking fingers. My breath hitched as the line rang, each tone stretching into eternity, my mind racing with what I'd say if she picked up, what I'd do if she didn't. I felt like I was stepping into unknown territory, like I was opening a box I couldn't close again, but I didn't hang up. I let it ring, let myself take the risk, because I knew I couldn't keep living with the ghost of her haunting me. Now, here's the part that's going to leave you on the edge of your seat, the twist I didn't see coming even in my wildest dreams. The call connected, and for a moment, there was just silence, a heavy, loaded silence that made my heart hammer in my chest. Then I heard it, a soft, familiar sound, one I hadn't heard in over a decade, but one I'd recognize anywhere. It wasn't her voice, not yet, but a quiet intake of breath, like she was just as nervous, just as unsure as I was. And in that split second, before a single word was spoken, I felt something shift, something monumental. I realized that no matter what happened next, no matter where this conversation led, I'd already taken the hardest step. I'd reached out, I'd faced the past, and I was ready to hear whatever truth she had to share. I'm not going to tell you what was said, not yet, because honestly, I'm still processing it myself. But I will say this. That letter, that single piece of paper, changed everything. It forced me to confront the pain I'd buried, the love I'd never let go of, and the man I'd become in the years since she left. It gave me a chance to rewrite my story, to decide if I wanted to keep running from the past or face it head on. And as I sat there, the phone still warm in my hand after the call ended, I felt a strange kind of peace, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I could find closure, or something even better. So, Reddit, that's my tale, a messy, emotional ride through love, loss, and the power